The recipe tamales. You got a perfect menu for everybody. Champy's Chicken is perfect for watching the big game or taking a meal to the lake house, down to the coast, or stay in the restaurant and dine in a great atmosphere. It's all made fresh to order right there on 119 in Alabaster. Champy's Chicken.
Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The social media team at Next Round Live is dedicated to giving you daily news conferences and practice video from UAB, Alabama, Auburn, and around college football. Follow and compare to the sites you used to visit. You'll also get the latest highlights and news from the Next Round Daily Show. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. See more at nextroundlive.com.
If renting is putting a dent in your bank account, here's your sign from the universe that it's time to buy a new home. And who better to help you through the ins and outs of home buying than our friends at Mortgage Right. With Mortgage Right, you don't have to worry about becoming a short notice mortgage expert because they do all the heavy lifting for you. They're trusted mortgage professionals and they'll help you choose the right mortgage option and stand by your side every step of the way. Visit mortgageright.com/TNR to buy before renting runs you dry. That's mortgageright.com/TNR. NMLS 2239, Equal Housing Lender. Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The social media team at Next Round Live is dedicated to giving you daily news conferences and practice video from UAB, Alabama, Auburn, and around college football. Follow and compare to the sites you used to visit. You'll also get the latest highlights and news from the Next Round Daily Show. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. See more at nextroundlive.com.
I'm waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on this prison bus. This is it, the apocalypse. Whoa, I'm waking up. I feel it in my bones to make my systems grow. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Ooh, oh, 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 ooh, oh, oh. I'm radioactive, radioactive. Ooh, oh, 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 ooh, oh, oh. I'm radioactive, radioactive. I'll raise my flags, don my clothes. It's a revolution, I suppose. We're painted red to fit right in. Whoa. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on this prison bus. This is it, the apocalypse. Whoa, I'm waking up. I feel it in my bones to make my systems grow. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Ooh, oh, 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 ooh, oh, oh. I'm radioactive, radioactive. Ooh, oh, 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 ooh, oh, oh. I'm radioactive, radioactive. And it's been a while since I could say that I wasn't addicted, and it's been a while since I could say I love myself as well. It's been a while since I've seen the way the candles light your face. It's been a while, but I can still remember just the way you taste and everything I can remember.
the regular season is here, and what a rivalry weekend. Welcome into Monday Morning Live, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Promo code NEXTROUND gets you 50% off. Well, actually adds 50% to your deposit, a deposit bonus there with mybookie.ag. I'm Jim Dunaway, but this show is all about ESPN's Tom Luginbill, so let's bring him in. And Lugs, a lot to get to with the Iron Bowl and everything else on this chase for championship weekend. But my first question, I just want to start off with this. It's 4th and 31. There is nothing short of a touchdown that works in this case. Yeah. And you know, I know zero about football, but to rush two people and give Jalen Milroe 6.3 seconds to throw a pass and make your guys cover for 6.3 seconds seems like the worst defensive play call you could make in that situation.
Yeah, the numbers did not benefit Auburn there. Now, you might say, okay, well, they're going to rush 2, they're going to drop 9. But the problem is if you look at the full all 22 picture of everybody on the field, the depth of almost half of those 9 wasn't even near the goal line. And when you have that one-on-one matchup in the corner, now it didn't initially look like it was going to be one-on-one, but when the other receiving target cut inside and the second defender went with him and joined the safety, it left Isaiah Bond one-on-one. The bottom line is they're so petrified of Jalen Milroe's legs. And you may say, but it's 4th and 31. Well, yeah, it was also 3rd and 20 when he got 19 with the big collision down there in the red areas.
You don't have to. Hell, he's got to run it into the end zone. At that point, you got 11 guys in 31 yards. You got 11 guys who can get there.
I know. I'm trying to think about it through all different avenues. None of it makes sense. I get it. It was a bad play call for a moment where you're good enough on defense at Auburn to rush 4 and probably play normal coverage. Just stay deep as the deepest. But provide some form of a clock in Jalen Milroe's head to where he either has to get the ball off early, all right, or he has to get the ball off under duress. Either one of those two options is better than what they chose by a mile.
Yeah, it's a crazy ending, one that keeps Alabama's playoff hopes alive, and one that'll be talked about for a long, long time in these parts. 4th and 31. The gravedigger, whatever you want to call it, the disaster, what was it, disaster at Jordan Hare or something like that, a variety of different names for this one. But ultimately, we go back and break down this game a little bit, and we're doing this backwards, I know, from the last play on. But you've got a punt that is fumbled that gives Alabama life. If you don't even put anybody back. If you don't even put anybody back to catch the punt and just have 11 guys up at the line to prevent a fake and just let that thing roll around, I feel like you still get out with a victory. If you don't even put anybody back for the punt, I still feel like you get out with a victory.
Well, and how awkward was how he fielded the punt. I mean, that in and of itself, when it happened, I couldn't wait to see the replay because I couldn't believe what I had just seen. But you're right. Again, all of these what-if scenarios and all of these armchair quarterback scenarios, but unfortunately, the two you just outlined aren't like a deep thought process line of thinking. They're fairly obvious ones. I can understand putting some back there and fielding it. You trust your return, and that's all fine. But you could have done exactly what you just outlined there. I mean, that game couple, put it this way, Jim, like how close were we to Armageddon this last weekend?
Oh, I mean, with what went on with Georgia Tech, Washington State, Florida State, Florida, Alabama, Auburn. I mean, yeah, all across the board.
And it all worked out.
Yeah.
It all worked out the way kind of in to some degree, the way the committee kind of needed it to right now. But here's the issue that you've got to look at going forward. And I've had people making this debate. We talked about it on Friday night on our broadcast. Is there a scenario if we're going to assume Florida State is an undefeated ACC champ, and if Alabama were to beat Georgia, could you put both Alabama and Georgia out?
Yeah, it's a
If
possibility.
Texas,
Yeah, it's a
if
possibility.
Texas is a one-loss champ and has the card against Alabama. See, what we got to remind people here with the committee is at the end of the day, you have to make a determination whether you think a team that has a head-to-head versus another team is quote-unquote unequivocally better, right? If you don't believe that, then head-to-head becomes secondary. If you think that this team is head and shoulders above that other team, but see, I don't think the committee will look at it that way. I think that they will look outside of a dominant win for Texas on Friday night. I think they will look at the team that really truly ascended as being Alabama in terms of improved from week 2 to now. Now you may say, well, Lugs, like Texas had to win 2 games, one against a ranked opponent with a backup quarterback. They've lost their starting tailback, and they've still come up with ways to win versus a pretty solid schedule, and that's fair. But I'm just trying to paint the picture and outline everything of how something like that could happen. And we're sitting here going into championship weekend. We have so many teams still in this thing.
I watched the Alabama-Auburn game, and I was taken back to the fact that I knew Auburn would be better after New Mexico State.
We talked about it last week.
Yeah,
right?
it would not factor in this game at all. And listen, I just named a couple of coaching things there at the end. Let's give Hugh Freeze some credit that team was ready to play. They ran the ball 42 times for 244 yards right at Alabama. They didn't break 93 yards passing, so they had to run the football, and they were in a position to win the game. Now I ask the question with Alabama. It took a 4th and 31 to escape Jordan-Hare Stadium. Do you think that Alabama team plays better against Georgia than it did on the road at Auburn? I do. I used the same logic I did with New Mexico State and Auburn this past week on how they would play against Alabama. I think Alabama, away from one of the toughest places, and I will make an argument, the toughest place in the world to play in Jordan-Hare.
I would agree.
Going to Atlanta, a place they've been very comfortable in, playing in a neutral site against Georgia, will be a much better Alabama team than that showed up at Jordan-Hare Stadium. They'll be more comfortable in this game this week than they were this past week. Auburn made them uncomfortable with the things they were doing, and that atmosphere is just overwhelming at times.
It's absolutely overwhelming. And listen, I think whether it's as a fan, whether it's as a broadcaster or a member of that committee, you have to look at rivalry weekends differently. There's anything can happen. We saw that happen, okay, all weekend long. And I think that they give environment, opponent, regardless of record, knowing the history, they give that real credence, meaning I don't think they dock teams who narrowly escape or win at the very end in that scenario. I really don't. In fact, I think they probably respect it more because of how difficult it is. And then you'll press the reset button, and I totally agree with you, Jim, and we talked about this last week with Auburn. They would come ready to play. They did. Yeah, this is a better setting for them. The environment's a better setting. I would make the argument once again that the fact that Georgia's quarterback is not a runner is something that plays in Alabama's favor. So I think there's a lot of factors and variables in this one that would point to, a pretty evenly matched ballgame. Now, I'll give you mentioned giving Hugh Freeze and Auburn credit where I thought they did a great job. They knew in the offensive line they couldn't just line up and push Alabama around. So what did they do? They gap schemed them. Block down, pull out, pin and pull, counter, a lot of misdirection in the backfield so that they could angle block these guys, get leverage on the ball to create some of those run lanes. And they did a great, great job of that. Now, I would anticipate that we might see Georgia do some of that too, because I think this game, athlete per athlete, is fairly equitable across the board.
So that's coming up. Couple of reactions to the game. Landmine believer in what we're talking about on just how tough it is. In 2009, 2015, and 2021, Alabama either won the national title
or played for the national title, and it took fourth quarter drives to win those games or get it to overtime to win the game at Jordan-Hare Stadium. It's been that difficult for even teams that went on to either win or play for the national championship at Alabama. And Nick Saban talked about it. And this is true. This is true. I mean, we spent the whole day celebrating the kick six down at Jordan-Hare Stadium. We're down there, Brown and I and EG are down there, and there's kiosk and there's kick six, things being sold, and Chris Davis is out there leading the cheers and it's all going on there from a decade ago on what I still think is the most remarkable and impossible win in Iron Bowl history. The one I saw Saturday is second in my mind. So all that's going on, and then afterwards, I make it to the post game, and Nick Saban sits down and says, if you do this long enough, you're going to have some at the end of the game that goes against you, and some at the end of the game that goes for you. And finally, it went for Alabama at the end of the game in this one, unlike it did 10 years earlier in the kick six. So, I guess in the theory of large numbers, all these things work their way out. But in a game where Auburn had every chance in the last 4 minutes to win that game, Alabama escapes. In that game, on that last play, Nick told us afterwards that they practice this every week. That play called the grave digger every week. But obviously you don't do it at 4th and 31. What do you think? You think they do it 4th and 20, 4th and 15, you don't do 4th and 31, right? I mean, that distance is almost impossible.
Correct. You may script that out every now and then, and on a Thursday or a Friday, and you're running through all of your scenarios, all of your what if scenarios, down and distance, hash mark, line to gain. Where are we on the field? Are we at the 50-yard line? Are we at the 15-yard line? What do we have to get to? How much time is left? Do we have any timeouts? Do we not have any timeouts? And then, you're trying to obviously put yourself in a position where you get a scenario that worked out in this case where you're one-on-one with somebody. What's odd about it, though, is this wasn't a matchup created using measurables. Isaiah Bond's one of the shorter people on the field. Right. In this particular setting. This wasn't trying to get a 6'4" Keon Coleman at Florida State matched up against your 5'11" corner. That's not what took place here, which makes it even more remarkable. But yeah, I mean, that's not coach fluff when he's saying that. All of those things are very real and they're very true. Now, how do you come up with what your line to gain is in this and that? I think you juggle it and you come up with different scenarios each and every week. Or you practice something that's happened to you before and you didn't handle it well, or you didn't get the conversion. But sometimes, listen, this is a weird game where the ball can go in a lot of different directions. Do you remember because you mentioned the game, I think it was the year Auburn won the national championship in 2010. They're playing in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. And Alabama is rolling. I mean, absolutely rolling. And I can't remember who the running back was at the time. It might have been Mark Ingram. But anyway, he's streaking down the right sideline. If you look at your TV, going right to left. Yep. Far sideline. And I want to say it was Williams, the linebacker for Auburn, comes up behind the running back and pops the ball out. Now, the running back is probably this far from the sideline. If you remember, Jim, from like the 20-yard line when he popped that ball out, that ball rolled. A football, not a basketball. Right. Rolled straight in through to the end zone and out the back of the end zone. All it had to do is go that far and be out of bounds. Yep. Right? But on that play, on that day, in that moment, the oblong-shaped ball rolled straight. Like a complete anomaly. And those are the types of plays that Nick Saban's talking about. The kick six. I always try to remind people, you got to look at the kick six and remember who was on the field. You've got all skilled athletes for Auburn, and you've got elephants on ice for Alabama because they're in field goal production. It's all linemen. Your most not athletic, but maybe your most quote unquote skilled guy was your holder and your kicker. Yeah, Terrion Arnold on our show this week told us that he still brings that up every year at different times as coaching moments, because he had told everybody, don't watch the kick, cover the kick in case we miss it. And he says you can go back and look at the tape,
and every person on Alabama's team is sitting there watching the kick. Nobody's covering the kick; they're watching the kick until it comes up short, and they're like, "Oh, he's returning it," and they're not athletic enough to get over there to him.
No,
you got to play to
big
the
guys
end.
versus skill guys.
It's all the Iron Bowl, man. That's all you have to say. It's the Iron Bowl, and it lives up to it almost every year. Just especially down at Jordan-Hare. It was a great weather day, beautiful crowd, beautiful atmosphere. Just always an enjoyable weekend, and this one is heartbreaking for Auburn fans as Alabama gets the win 27-24 to keep everything intact going into the SEC championship weekend coming up. And we'll talk more about that coming up at the end of the show here as we set the stage for Georgia and Alabama. But a lot of other stuff to get to, including the big game between Michigan and Ohio State. And that one surprised me a little bit. I'll remind you that the show is brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag, and also by our friends at Blakely's Bouquet. Order online at blakeleysbouquets.com, over the phone at 205-579-4900, 579-4900, or in person at their full-service flower shop on Oxmoor Road, Blakely's Bouquet. Blakely's Bouquets. We'll also get to your comments on the Iron Bowl and the Alabama win a little bit later in the show as well. But let's jump to the other big game away from Alabama's win at Auburn. Michigan beats Ohio State. I was surprised because I had convinced myself throughout the week that I thought Ohio State was going to win this game. And you watch this game, and I continue to be shocked at how conservative Ryan Day is all of a sudden in this game against Michigan. He seems to be playing, as he's now lost 3 in a row to them, right into Michigan's hands the way he calls his games now. He's almost tried to duplicate and build Ohio State away from that high-scoring skill set of a team they were. He's almost tried to rebuild them as a duplicate copy of Michigan the way they played this year. And he got out Michigan in this game. They never led in this game. And hats off to Sharon Moore, who he called a halfback pass, had some fourth down decisions. The guy was aggressive. Michigan was more aggressive than Ohio State in this game, and they're now the betting favorite to win the national championship.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with the approach for Ohio State, because I think when you're in Ohio State and you look at where is their strength is in all of their perimeter skill, including the running back. Why would you get in a phone booth slugfest with Michigan? They want you to do that.
That's right.
What they don't want you to do is spread them thin. I think up-tempo, spread the field sideline to sideline, horizontally, use every bit of that 53 and a third. All right. Spread that defense thin. Doesn't mean you can't run the ball. You absolutely can run the ball. But the closer to the ball Michigan's players are, the less exposed they are. And again, we've seen this approach from Ryan Day. And I don't know if it's I don't want to bring up the whole Lou Holtz, Ryan Day, brouhaha. But I wonder if there's a part of Ryan Day that really deep down wants to prove that they can get into a fist fight with somebody, even if that somebody is Michigan, and win and prove to the world that they're quote unquote tough. Well, you can be really, really tough and find other ways to win. So it does make you think and wonder what the line of thinking is there for Ryan Day, and if it becomes a bit personal and he gets frustrated because he doesn't like the label that sometimes is placed upon them.
You mentioned Georgia, Washington, and Florida State all surviving earlier. Let's jump into that a little bit more. Georgia, it was 31-23. They beat Georgia Tech. Late touchdown by Georgia Tech made that look a little scarier than it really was. Kirby Smart went into that rivalry game resting players for the SEC championship. He rested his players. And he says it wasn't because of opponent, they were not 100% and blah, 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 blah. But he went into that game resting his players for the SEC championship. Made the score look a little closer than it probably is. Georgia Tech's improved, but they're not that close to Georgia. Were you surprised at how that game played out?
Yeah, a little bit. And you're right. Georgia Tech is improved. You knew that Brent Key was going to have his guys ready to play. I think it's really dangerous when you sit guys like that in a rivalry type game. I think it could jump up and bite you. Now, how injured is somebody? Is it a scenario where, listen, we cannot play this guy. He's not going to be able to play the next week. Or is it, hey, got some bumps and bruises, Let's lean on our depth right here, and we'll go out and we'll own the fact that we're better than they are. They are better than Georgia Tech, obviously. But it was a lot closer than I thought it would be. I thought, to be honest with you, Georgia Tech kind of played them as toe-to-toe as anybody has all year long.
Right.
And again, credit Brent Key. He's got that team bowl eligible. And that team actually, they screwed up 2 other games this year. They should actually have 2 other wins, and they're better than their record. They're bowl eligible, but they're better than their record.
Yeah, and then there's Washington 24-21. For Washington, it wasn't about style points because they're in if they beat Oregon. And they just needed a W. They just didn't need that loss. And they got it with a 42-yard field goal at the end. But I'm telling you, since the Oregon game, when they won that game, that team has looked more flawed than even Florida State with the backup quarterback. That Washington team looks flawed to me. Now, they've got to go beat a red-hot Oregon team to stay unbeaten, so that'll take care of itself. But that Washington team's not clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, I don't want to say they've flatlined, but they've certainly paralleled since that Oregon game. And Oregon has ascended on a skyrocketing trajectory of, for the most part, week in and week out dominance. And, I was really impressed. I think I mentioned this last week with how Washington handled the road environment at Oregon State. That was impressive. Bad weather conditions, ranked team on the road in conference against a team that was 5-0. You had to have it, right? Then they come back and they're playing a Washington State team that all of a sudden woke up and throttles Colorado. So you get Washington, Washington State's got their attention. And again, a rivalry game. Should Washington have probably won that game by 10, 14 points? Yeah, probably so. But in a rivalry game with a team in Wazoo that was playing better and a really, really dynamic quarterback in Cameron Ward, they didn't. But I feel like the difference between, let's just say, the Iron Bowl and the Apple Cup is leading into the Iron Bowl. Alabama's just been doing this, skyrocketing upward, improving each and every week. As I mentioned, with Washington heading into the Apple Cup, they haven't done that. It was more of the same of what we've essentially seen just about every single week. Now, Arizona's turned out to be a really, really good football team. So that outcome of that game and the way it played out wasn't all that surprising. But the Stanford game, right? How they played, and they got a win, but how they played against SC. I would be very, very concerned if I was a Washington fan with this Oregon game coming up in the Pac-12 championship game. I think Oregon is head and shoulders better than Washington.
Yeah, and the point spread shows that almost double digits Oregon favored on the Friday night there in Vegas. And then everyone was watching Florida State, and they're down 12-0 to Florida. And I will admit, for a lot of people who are in Auburn wearing crimson and white, everywhere I walked, people were like, "Hey, Dunaway, Florida's down. Florida's up 12-0 on Florida State," which opens up a clearer path for Alabama if they were to win the SEC championship game. Sure. And then Florida State leaned on Trey Benson, 3 touchdowns from their running back, and they win the game. If Florida State beats Louisville, coming up in the ACC championship game, not a given, but Louisville got beat this past week. Did Florida State show the committee enough that they're still a functioning playoff-like offense in that win over Florida in the Swamp on the road?
Whether they showed them enough or not, I think is irrelevant, because there is no way they are not going to put a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion in the college football playoff. If they chose not to do that, then what are we doing with this whole thing?
Yeah.
Like, why do we have any stipulations? Why do we have any criteria? Why do we even have this setup? Because that's the whole point. I said, last week after this injury happens, I don't care if Florida State wins 16-10 and 17-14. They do a backup quarterback with a championship game, and you had to go into the Swamp. You're in. You're in. And so I think the committee just wants to see how good is Florida State around Tate Rodemaker, in the sense that they might be so good, and they are at some spots, that if the quarterback just doesn't screw it up, they could be just fine. And that's how I would look at it as well.
Yeah. So you're saying that if they've got that 0, they're in.
I think so.
So Florida State wins, Michigan wins, Georgia wins, Texas wins, Oregon win. You're leaving out Texas and Oregon.
You're assuming that Alabama beats Georgia?
No. Georgia wins, Michigan wins, Florida State wins, 3 unbeatens. Oregon wins and Texas wins. You're leaving out one of those. You're leaving out either Texas or Oregon.
And you know what? And nobody wins there because both of them are completely deserving. I'm not so sure. Again, 13-0 ACC champ. I get that. Do I think right now? Am I convinced that Florida State is better than Texas? No.
Right.
Am I convinced that Florida State is better than Oregon? No. And again, it goes into that question of most deserving versus best 14. See, that's part of the issue too in all of this. When this whole thing started, they should have never created that phrase, best 4 teams, no matter what, because that's not really what it is.
Right.
Like last year, Alabama, I'm sorry, is better than TCU, right? And I get it, but guess what? TCU was most deserving. Well, okay, well then don't come up with that type of phrasing, because once you do that, then you get people starting to point at certain wins and certain losses not mattering.
That's right. Yeah. When we come back, I want your reaction in the chat rooms. So load those up there, and we'll bounce and get a couple of those in the chat room of your reaction to the Iron Bowl and where we're headed. We'll also talk about the coaching carousel and then set up the championship week. After an amazing Iron Bowl where Alabama gets the victory in one of the most amazing sequences of plays I've ever seen, where Alabama was first and goal at the 7, and they proceeded to lose yardage on the next 3 plays, backwards from 1st and 7 to where it was 4th and 31, and they get the miracle at Jordan-Hare, Alabama style, with a 31-yard touchdown pass, and Alabama wins it 27-24. Your reaction to that coming up, and also everything else going on in college football. The show being brought to you by our friends at Way to Wellness, the program that helped save my life because I was overweight. My blood pressure was creeping up. My cholesterol was in a bad place. And they got everything working in a better direction, better numbers all across the board. And it starts with a healthier diet. You can do that and learn more right now at the website at planforme.com. Planforme.com. No cookie cutter plan. Everything's designed for you. The program is overseen by board certified professionals. There's no contracts. There's no sign up fees, and you get a free consultation. Planforme.com. Planforme.com is the website. It is Way to Wellness, your journey to healthy living. This is Monday Morning Live, brought to you by mybookie.ag.
Tom Luganville here for Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear. For great holiday shopping for the whole family, this place is a must. Jack's carries all the name brands in boots, hats, and apparel, including the Kynes Ranch brand, as seen on Yellowstone. You might not look like Kevin Costner, but you can dress like him. Jack's also has the only Ariat shop within a shop in the state of Alabama. Come see us every Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Just look for the big red building off I-65, exit 304 in Coleman.
Hey, Lance Taylor from the next round to tell you about our friends at Gutter Cap. Gutter Cap's that patented aluminum cover system that fits over most existing gutters to keep out debris and eliminate that gutter cleaning. It's backed with a lifetime warranty, almost 20-year service record right here in Birmingham. Stay off that dangerous ladder forever. 45% off the retail price now if you call guttercapbirmingham.com. Call my good friend Chris Stewart now, 205-823-2212. Cap it, don't snap it. It's Gutter Cap.
Thanksgiving is here, and let the New York Butcher Shop be the place to get all of your holiday meal items. Their premium turkeys are fresh, free-range, and hormone-free. The New York Butcher Shop also has a wide selection of chef-prepared side items to help save you time in the kitchen. Pick up a bottle of wine, and your meal will be complete. Turkeys are selling fast, so place your order today. 2 locations to serve you, in Cahaba Heights and on Highway 119 in Greystone. The New York Butcher Shop. Rare quality, well-done service.
The Next Round Golf Court is here. Your chance to play 4 area golf courses for just $89. Get 18 holes of golf and cart at Limestone Springs, Cross Creek, The Meadows, and the newly renovated Woodward Golf Club. That's a value of $247 for just $89. Or get the Next Round Deluxe Golf Cart for just $119. It gets you all 4 courses with cart, plus an exclusive Next Round Golf t-shirt, koozie, golf tees, and a sticker. There are no restrictions. The cart is good through September 2024. Get your golf cart now at nextround.store.
It's time to start thinking about employee holiday gifts. Consider getting your hardworking guys a pair of Red Wing boots. Each day your employees are on the job site helping your company succeed, so reward them with comfort at its best. The Red Wing mobile shoe truck can visit your shop and fit your employees with a great selection of boots. Or Red Wing gift cards can be purchased at your local Red Wing store, available in all amounts. Whichever program you choose, your employees will appreciate the quality, service, and selection from Red Wing shoes, and they'll also be thankful they have such a great boss. Reward your employees this holiday season with Red Wing shoes. This holiday season, give the gift of peace and security to your home with $50 off recurring Wayne's Pest Control services. As the weather cools down, stop mice, bed bugs, and rodents before they come in. Call 866-WAYNES-1 to gift yourself a safe and pest-free home. Sign up for any recurring service with Wayne's and save $50 off. Don't let mice and rats be uninvited guests to your holiday celebrations. Get a pest-free holiday and save $50 off recurring Wayne's Pest Control services when you call 866-WAYNES-1.
Let's get your reaction to the Iron Bowl. We'll jump into the chat room, brought to you today by our friends at Gutter Cap, a patented aluminum cover system that fits over most existing gutters to keep out debris and eliminate gutter cleaning. It's backed with a lifetime warranty as well. It's our friend C. Stu and Gutter Cap, almost 20 years of service here in Birmingham. Stay off those dangerous ladders. 45% off retail price. GutterCapBirmingham.com, GutterCapBirmingham.com, or call C. Stu up on his cell phone today, 205-823-2212, 205-823-2212, or GutterCapBirmingham.com. Rod says, did Milrose seem to try to be a throwing quarterback again this past weekend? He had gotten so good to Luganville at 1, 2, 3, and if it's not there, run the ball. He sort of had progressed to quick reads, and if it is not there, run the football. Did he revert back a little bit in that hostile environment to what we saw with Jalen Milroe early in the year, like in the Texas game, where maybe he held the ball too long?
I think maybe on a couple occasions that's fair. I mean, they averaged almost 11 yards per pass attempt. So they were getting some explosives and getting some big plays through the air. So, I think that, did he revert to that? Maybe a little, but maybe you give Auburn a little credit as well, putting him in a position to where maybe they're clouding the issue on the back end and he's not seeing it as quickly, or they threw some stuff at him that they maybe didn't practice or prepare for that they hadn't shown on tape previously. So there could be some of that going on within the game.
Tesla Talk cannot, and several others, cannot believe how many touchdowns Alabama's had called back this year because of penalties. You go back to the loss to Texas, a couple of them in that game. Yeah, had 2 in that game that year, early in the year.
10 penalties, 10 penalties, 2 touchdowns would have been called back, and it was 2 on Saturday as well. I mean, at the end of the day, Jim, Auburn turns the ball over 3 times, Alabama doesn't.
Yep. Benjamin, Roll Tide Roll, just wants to jump in and say that today. We appreciate him jumping in. Yes, a lot of people are saying Auburn's bowl projections, the Duke's Mayo's Bowl. Quick question. A lot of people want to know, what do you do with Ohio State? Now, people are referencing, all due respect to your parent company, ESPN, but the bowl, the playoff projector that is at the ESPN, that thing's a little whacked. Not because it's got Alabama only at 8%, but because Ohio State still has over a 50% chance to make the playoffs. I don't understand how. I don't
understand how it works either.
I don't understand
get it. I try not to look at it.
Yeah. Michael brings up something here that I can't tell if the Auburn DB does this or not. And Blake says, don't start with that BS, Michael. He did not. But Michael says it looks like the Auburn DB comes up and is trying to, to get one of his defenders to move or shift or something, and makes a clapping sound when the bad snap happens that sets Alabama back, which
disconcerting signals.
Yeah, that is a penalty if that if it's called. I mean, it's not always called. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out why that snap happened when it happened, but if you're looking for circumstantial evidence, you can just say it happened that way because it's happened that way all year. It happened earlier in the game. Milroe was just a great athlete, and the snap was better, and it actually hit him, and he was able to catch it. But throughout the year, there's been a problem with snapping the football, even at home games, from the center to Jalen Milroe. It's been a problem all year, and it almost cost Alabama the Iron Bowl there. Quick update here on all that. My computer reset the comments there as everyone's rolling in. I was about to read another one. People commenting on just how amazing the atmosphere there is. It's I grew up an Alabama fan. It is now my favorite place for the Iron Bowl because it seems like every game is so memorable. You're on top of the fans are on top of you. The student section does about as good a job as anybody in the country.
They never stop.
Yeah,
they never stop.
Yeah, it's just so good. Steve, it's a big if, but a Bama win over the number one team with the rest of their top 25 wins, should that count for something with the committee? Let's talk about that. That's a good question by Steve. Because when the new rankings come out tomorrow night, you'll have Ohio State that will drop, but I don't think they'll drop past, Alabama. So Ohio State technically will still be ahead of Alabama without any games left to play. But again, that's where we are right now. That doesn't factor in if Alabama beats Georgia.
Right.
So if Alabama beats Georgia, how much weight does that carry with, I know you mentioned how important that 0 is out there with some Power 5 teams like Florida State, but how much weight does a win of Alabama and being SEC champion carry with the committee if they're able to beat Georgia? And they are the underdog, so it would be an upset.
Yeah, I think it carries a lot of weight. But again, the fact that Texas is still in this equation and is in line to win the Big 12 when they play Oklahoma State, that's going to factor in as well. And the deal is, and I actually think this weighs in Alabama's favor, when we talked about kind of the language that they use. If you have two teams where there's a head-to-head, but you don't feel that what the team that owns the head-to-head is unequivocally better than the other team, which I think in this instance they wouldn't think that. They would probably feel that it's fairly equitable, that Alabama has shown a resurgence that has improved dramatically, maybe one of the most improved teams in college football. So, I think regardless of what happens in the Pac-12 championship game, that champion is likely in. Especially with where they've been rated to this point, where they have set what the pecking order has been. So it comes down to whether or not Florida State goes down to Louisville, which, Jim, that could happen. I mean, Louisville, the only issue with Louisville is outside of the Miami game this year, they have not played well on the road. And I hate weighing good losses versus bad losses, but that loss to Pitt on the road was a bad loss. Now, I understand that they had a lot of injuries and they lost their tailback and just bad weather, all of that stuff. But that can happen to everybody. I don't think the committee will look that far back at it. If Louisville beats Florida State is out. I think that they are out. That opens the door then for multiple teams to be in. The question, I think, at the end of the day is as much about what would the committee do to Georgia? Like, how can you all of a sudden say that team that's won however many consecutive games, defending two-time national champion, goes from 1-5 or 1-6? But essentially that's what might have to happen if everything else holds chalk.
Yeah, this will be the first time, I believe, in the playoff era that we're going to leave out one, maybe two teams that are good enough to win the whole thing. I don't think that's happened before. Yeah,
it hasn't. You're right. I think 100%. It's crazy.
I think there'll be at least one, maybe two SEC teams left out that could win it all, and they will be either Oregon or Texas. I think one of them will be left out that could win it all, and I think Ohio State will be left out that could win it all. I mean, there's going to be several teams left out that could end up winning this thing, just because there's too many spots there. JJ says, going back to what Luke's remarks about Ryan Day trying to force the issue because of his toughness, it cost him last year too, with the future NFL Rookie of the Year MVP, and he tried to out Michigan. That is a problem. So we're getting ready for this championship week coming up. And there was a lot of other things that happened this past weekend. We didn't get into this. But with the championship week coming up, what does Alabama, Lugs, have to do to beat Georgia? The last time that they played at Jordan-Hare and had a wild ending with the drive with no timeouts just to get it to overtime, and they went in 4 overtimes. They went in and they beat Georgia, and eventually losing to them in the national championship game. That's the last time Georgia's lost. So what does Alabama have to do, and what can they do? What do you think they're good at that will cause Georgia problems in this championship game coming up?
Well, they're so different than some of the other iterations that have taken on Georgia, especially from a natural passing stance of who they are as an identity offensively. As much improvement as Jalen Milroe has shown, he's not the natural passer of a Tua. He's not the natural passer of a Bryce or a Mack, and that's fine. And they found ways to work around that and then improve him in the process. I think that it is imperative that Alabama have success on first and second down in the run game, because you do not want to become one-dimensional against Georgia on defense, and you certainly don't want to be in 3rd and +7 routinely.
Yeah. Doesn't that come with Jalen Milroe again, who, like I was talking with Tyler Watts, the analyst on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and he kept saying the 5-yard pass in the Iron Bowl this past week, the 5-yard pass is there every time, but he's not taking it. He's looking for a bigger play down the field. If there's 5 yards there, take the 5 yards, and just keep moving that thing until they start taking the quick 5-yard pass away. Don't you just have to take positive plays when they're there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a general rule of thumb, regardless of who you are. Take what the defense gives you. You've heard it 100 times. I kind of liken the game plan to be one that would be reminiscent of what we saw Alabama look like offensively against Kentucky on the road a few weeks back.
Right.
Where you had designated quarterback run. You had some gap scheme run with Roydell Williams and the crew, and they were really effective in kind of doing what they wanted when they wanted to. But I think that a big part of this game plan is leaning on Jalen Milroe as the entire player, meaning that if you got to run him more than you'd like to, do it. He's that good. He's that dynamic. He's that difficult of a handful in the run game. And, I think he's made – and I would agree with Tyler Watts, though. I think up until the Iron Bowl, he'd made tremendous strides in that regard.
That's right.
We weren't talking about the offensive line the last several weeks. Well, why was that? Yeah, number one, they're playing better. But number two, he's helping them play better because he gets the ball out of his hands. Got to get back to that. But I think the early down production – is really, really important. If Alabama becomes one-dimensional in the area that they're not the strongest, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I another commenter, it's flying by fast again, wants to ask, isn't that Kirby Smart's defense Achilles heel? It was when he was at Alabama, a running quarterback. So, I mean, that is when Kirby was here in Tuscaloosa, if you faced a mobile quarterback, that was always tougher on Kirby's defenses. Do you think that has transitioned over to Georgia? Is still the guy who can also tuck it and run it is a problem for the way he likes to play defense?
I think it's a problem for everybody in college football, and it's proven to be a problem for Kirby Smart and Nick Saban when the two of them were together. When you look at the quarterbacks that created problems for them, they were runners. Nick Marshall, all right, Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you know where the quarterback's going to be all the time, I think that's the thing, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, the fact that Alabama knows defensively that they're not facing a runner at quarterback this week, that benefits Alabama. I think it's not just Kirby's Achilles heel. It's everybody in college football right now, because it puts so much strain on your defense, particularly when it comes to having adequate numbers in the box to defend that. Because once you do that, you create more one-on-ones on the outside because you don't have the pass coverage you would normally have.
Two more on that game. Dexter says Bama has a lot of talent. Hope we see it unleashed this weekend. Jace McClellan on crutches. As I was in the locker room or by the locker room as he was leaving Jordan-Hare Stadium. Nick Saban saying yesterday, left foot injury, questionable this week. Next 48 hours will say a lot, but it looks like McClellan could be a no-go. over in the SEC championship game, which Roydell and Jam still pretty good there, but the impact of no Jace McClellan, let's say he can't go, how big of an impact is it?
I think that's one of their deeper rooms. And I remember our crew when we were going into the game versus Arkansas, and we asked Coach about that. He goes, we think that room's really, really talented. And he also, he brought up a couple of freshmen that he was saying at the time. He goes, I wish we could play those guys more. They're talented enough to play more. We just don't have, there's not enough footballs to go around, not enough touches for all of them. So I liken it a little bit to the situation at Texas when they lost Jonathan Brooks. It happened to be at a position where they've got great depth and talent. So the drop-off is I don't think, going to be significant. Obviously, you want to have your full complement of weapons, but that's a position I think Alabama's in good hands if you're going to have an injury.
Yeah, I personally think Jam's actually the best pass protector in the running back room at picking up blitzes and stuff. Royal Payne says Beck isn't as mobile, and Georgia hasn't faced a D-line like Alabama this year. Is two things. Is Beck a mobile quarterback? What can he do with his legs? And two, will this be the best team Georgia's faced all year? I think it is.
I think Carson Beck is athletic, but he's not a runner. I think those are two different things. He can navigate the pocket. He can create a second passing chance, but he's not a guy that's going to just take off and make multiple defenders miss and get to the edge and turn the corner and outrun everybody. That's not who he is. He's going to win with his arm, win with his mind. And I would agree with that sentiment. But, I mean, how many people do have Alabama's personnel on defense in the front seven? There's very few teams out there. I think Texas is one of them. Georgia's one of them. Depending on the day, Michigan, Ohio State. So it's a handful of teams that present that type of problem. I think the thing that's impressive about this Alabama group is the two interior guys, 96, 92, are really, really good. I mean, really good. And then you've got the edge guys that can collapse the pocket. And there's just a lot of scheme versatility with their edge and their outside linebackers. And they're just so active and disruptive that they put a ton of – I mean, look at the two losses that Ole Miss has. Look at who they're to, and look at why it happened, right? Alabama and Georgia, and completely got Ole Miss, which is a really good offensive football team, out of whack, off schedule, because they couldn't handle the front people. And that's where something's got to give in this coming matchup.
All right, home stretch here. We got all week to talk Bama and Georgia and the other championship games. My belief on the Heisman Trophy, Bo Nix wins the Heisman if they beat Washington Friday night. If Bo Nix and Oregon loses Friday night and Washington wins, then I think Jaden Daniels of LSU wins the Heisman. You agree or disagree?
I would tend to probably agree with that, and I would have zero issue with whichever way the votes took it, because I think both guys have been remarkably worthy, and I would say remarkably consistent. Like, the week in and week out excellence and outstanding level of play is really difficult to sustain. I don't know if we acknowledge that enough. Like, you're bound to go out and maybe kind of have an off day, right?
Right.
Not those two. And I think that's why they've clearly put themselves ahead of the pack.
MyBookie.ag brings you this show. You use the promo code NEXTROUND. You get a 50% deposit bonus. 50% deposit bonus. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag. Again, the promo code NEXTROUND to enjoy the playoffs and the bowl season that is coming up. Now to the coaching carousel. And we'll circle back around to more comments before the show's over if we've got time. But let's go SEC first. No, let's do the one non-SEC first. Michigan State gets Jonathan Smith. And I remember when Alabama hired Bill Curry from Georgia Tech, people were surprised at Georgia Tech that Bill Curry left his alma mater to come to Alabama. But it made sense. It didn't make sense to me when Rich Rodriguez left West Virginia, his school, to go to Michigan. That seemed like it didn't fit. Didn't fit.
Yeah.
And neither one of them really worked out that well. Now, here's Jonathan Smith leaving his school, Oregon State, to now go coach Michigan State. I understand part of this is because Oregon State doesn't have a permanent home. They don't have a bowl. They don't even know their schedule next year. So it doesn't make sense. Michigan State got a good coach, I feel like.
No, I thought they got a great coach. And listen, in fairness to Jonathan Smith, these are extremely rare circumstances. This does not happen if the Pac-12 isn't dissolving.
Right.
I think what Jonathan Smith did is he looked at the landscape and asked himself one very important question. How in the world is a Power 5 athletic department supposed to survive on a Group of 5 level television contract? Like, how are you supposed to go from $32 million or whatever to 5? And how you can't survive that. And I think he looked at the long-term picture and said, I don't care if the job is roast beef tech university. Like, I've got to find a way to survive and get out and move into something that is viable, sustainable, that doesn't have the threat of dissolving. And I think when you match blue collar, hard nosed, well coached, attention to details, cold weather climate, and Oregon State and Michigan State have an awful lot of similarities, an awful lot. The only thing that I would say that he's going to have to adjust to is it's going to be a completely different recruiting landscape for him. You know, he's been at Washington, he's been at Boise, he's been at Montana, he's been at Oregon State now. And it's been the same recruiting landscape for essentially his entire coaching career. So that's going to be a bit of an adjustment, but I thought it made a lot of sense.
In the SEC, Mississippi State gets Jeff Lebby. So I'm right about this. Lebby, who was at Oklahoma before that, wasn't he with Lane at Ole Miss?
Yes.
Yeah, and then back with Art Briles at Baylor, right?
Yep, and then he was at UCF as well.
Yeah, so he's a offensive guy, really good play caller, right?
Yeah, he and Heupel and Briles and all those guys came up together. Really dynamic play caller. His offenses have been outstanding everywhere he has been. And now he's going to get an opportunity. And I think it's important at a place like Michigan State, Jim, that you have a certain feel and look offensively. Like you got to be a little quirky, a little different, a little dynamic, a little up tempo. You need that at a place like that. And there's familiarity. The athletic director there had been at Oklahoma previously and is very familiar with Jeff.
Yeah, February Stars points out, he's actually Art Briles' son-in-law as well, married Art's daughter, so that works out well too. And then Texas A&M. In a nutshell, tell me about the craziness. Do you really believe Mark Stoops was the guy for a second from Kentucky, and that because of fan outrage, much like Tennessee did a few years ago, that they backed off of Mark Stoops and went a different direction? Do you think Stoops was the guy a little bit?
Whether he was or he wasn't, let's just assume he was. To me, this is one of the most idiotic things of all time. You're going to push back on Mark Stoops. You paid any attention to what Mark Stoops has done in the coaching profession since he took that job? I mean, it would have been a huge home run hire, in my opinion. And I'm not saying Mike Elko's not. He's the first name that kind of came to mind. I know our broadcast crew in our opening game, Duke versus Clemson. Duke beats Clemson. You're sitting there looking at the job he'd done in a short period of time, but you're also saying to yourself, how sustainable is this? He might want to get out of there while the getting is good. And then this job opens up and all the stars align. But how could you as a Texas A&M fan push back on Mark Stoops if there's truth to that? I mean, give me a break. That right there kind of, to me, illustrates the problem at Texas A&M.
Yeah, Caleb says there was a report out there, and I saw it Saturday night, that they'd actually flown Stoops into College Station, then on the tarmac turned it around. And I have no confirmation on that, but I'd heard the same thing, Caleb, on Saturday night. Jerry wants to know, does Luganville think Arkansas regretting keeping Sam Pittman another year? They made the announcement before the last game they were doing that, and then the game with Missouri was a blowout, and it does look like that locker room, he had lost that locker room there.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. I know that over the last 2 years, and the last 2 years in particular, and in the games that I've had Arkansas in, they have been ravaged by injuries, just completely decimated. And in a place like that, it's not like the next guy just plugs and plays and you have no drop-off. There's going to be drop-off. You're far more of a developmental program. I think the bigger concern is KJ Jefferson regressed. KJ Jefferson did not get better, particularly this year. And now you're going to start all over at quarterback with a new offensive system, new offensive coordinator, and Sam Pittman, who I think is a great guy and probably a darn good offensive line. Well, I know he's a darn good offensive line coach. And I think the players like him, but I'm a little surprised at this move. And I don't think just the fact that they got blown out by Missouri after the fact. I think that was – they could have said, you're not coming back. I think the same result would have happened.
Goose says probably the best for Arkansas right now. Some really good jobs on the coaching carousel coming open. Try it next year. Rusty says, I don't understand why A&M thinks they're a top-tier team. That is so wild as they continue to try to hit that home run higher and get to the top part to match their spending in the SEC. All right, we got 50 seconds, Lugan Bill. Your one big takeaway from the weekend. One thing we didn't touch on. You pick anything rivalry weekend. We didn't touch about a ton. Was there one thing out there that we didn't hit today? NC State, man, surprises me. They got 9 wins.
I was actually just going to bring up NC State. When you look at the job Dave Doran did, I mean, you bring in Brennan Armstrong, you think all this marriage of him and Robert Anaya as the offensive coordinator, and it's going to look like 2020 and 2021 at Virginia, and he ends up getting benched. Then you have the freshman quarterback comes in. He decides to say, well, I'm going to redshirt. Okay, so now you go back to Brennan Armstrong. You lean on the defense. Brennan Armstrong starts playing good, and now they're going to be in line to potentially get 10 wins. I mean, what an unbelievable coaching job. And very interesting with North Carolina, man. It's 2 years in a row that they have tanked on the back half of the season.
Yeah, big losing streak for Mac there. Luganville, we'll see you after the championship games and the playoffs are released next Monday right here on Monday Morning Live, brought to you by mybookie.ag. The next round is coming up live at 9 a.m. Central Time with all your reaction from the locker room and a lot more with you guys on the Iron Bowl win by Alabama, 27-24 over Auburn. Good day, everybody.